Yo, what is up, guys? It's Cone back here again today with another video. The reigning Eastern Conference champion Miami Heat, the story of the NBA playoffs last season, beating the almighty Milwaukee Bucks, beating the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals after getting through the Pacers pretty easily in round one, and inevitably falling to the Los Angeles Lakers in 6 games in the NBA Finals, have just become the first team to be eliminated from the 2021 NBA playoffs to the Milwaukee Bucks in a sweep. The team that they bested last year in just 5 games, the team that they made look foolish, the team that everyone thought was going to win the Eastern Conference in the Milwaukee Bucks, fell pretty easily. And this season was the exact opposite. The Milwaukee Bucks dominated the Heat in this series, and I'm not going to talk about the Bucks too much in this video. The point of this video is I want to talk about what's next for the Miami Heat. This is a series I want to do as teams get eliminated from the playoffs, and I'm going to call it What's Next, I think. And the goal of this is just basically to outline what happened in this team season, what went wrong, what did they do well, and ultimately what does the outlook look for them in the coming seasons. What is their game plan for next year? What do I think they should do, and what do they do moving forward? But I do want to give credit to the Milwaukee Bucks. Like I said, this wasn't the Heat just playing poorly. This was the Bucks dominating this series on every single level. They wanted revenge, and that's exactly what they got. I'll talk more about the specifics of this game and of the Bucks going forward in my After the Buzzer video later tonight. So if you want to hear more about the Milwaukee Bucks and their potential matchup with the Brooklyn Nets next round, assuming they beat the Boston Celtics, which I'm sure they will, then be on the lookout for that video later tonight around 2 a.m. Eastern. But for right now, let's talk about the Miami Heat. Bad series all around from them. Jimmy Butler did not really come to play. He said he was stupidly locked in before the series, and it ended up being a lie. He shot around 25% from 3 and the field this series. I think it was like 29% from the field, averaging like 14 points per game. It was just not a good series from him. He didn't look as aggressive as he had been in the past. He shot way too many threes. He was settling, and the Bucks had a great defensive game plan to stop him. For the guy that we saw go off like we had never seen before in the NBA Finals last season, he looked very vulnerable and very human in this series. He looked nothing like the player we saw last year. And I don't know if that's necessarily a bubble thing. I'm not going to call the Heat bubble flukes in this video because every team was on the same playing field. Every team was in Orlando. Every team had those little distractions, no fans. It was an even playing field. But that Heat team was better. That Heat team had better execution, a better game plan, and their guys just stepped up more. This series, the Bucks had a dominant game plan to stop them, and the guys on the Heat just didn't step up. They didn't hit the shots they did in the past. Tyler Herro had a great game 4, but overall in the series, he averaged around like 7-8 points per game. Prior to this game, I'm not sure what his averages are up to. After dropping double-digit points in this game, he had 14, 4, and 2, which was a solid game from him. But overall, this Heat team is just not at all up to the level that they wanted to be. Coming out of a season where they surpassed all expectations coming into this year, a lot of people, me included, saying that they weren't going to be as good as they were going to be or as they were last season, and a lot of Heat fans, rightfully so, were mad about that. They were mad saying, oh, we just showed ourselves in the Eastern Conference playoffs, like what more do you want to see from us? And I think before the season I picked the Heat to be like a 5 or a 6 seed, and Heat fans were pissed at me. They were really mad. But this team just really kind of lacked the fire that last year's team had. I've said this in previous videos, but it felt like this Heat team last year, they felt like they were the best team. They felt like they were going into every series like, oh, we've got something to prove. And this year it felt like they almost saw themselves as the underdogs. I don't know. But like I said, it's not just mentality. It's the players. They miss Jay Crowder. This team doesn't have quite that level of shooting either. They honestly miss Kelly Olynyk a little bit for that floor spacing. Bam Adebayo has got to be more aggressive going forward in future seasons. He's got to develop offensively. He had 20 points and 14 rebounds in this game, and they got blown out. They lost by 17. Jimmy Butler had a triple-double, 12, 10, and 10, but he just wasn't as good. They needed him to be better. They needed him to be that great player they saw last season, and he just quite wasn't that. We're seeing a similar situation with the New York Knicks in their series right now. The Heat really just in this series didn't have anyone who they could go to get a bucket reliably. They need someone on this team that can give them some consistent offense. Jimmy Butler provided that last season, but I'm not sure how much Jimmy Butler is that guy. He's a great defender. He's a great scorer at times, a solid playmaker, a good rebounder. He's just a great player to have on your team. A top like 15, 20-ish player in the NBA. But in the NBA playoffs, especially against a team like the Milwaukee Bucks, who have so many scoring options in Giannis, Chris Middleton, Bryn Forbes was incredible in this series, Brook Lopez, you've got to have someone who can get buckets for you. And they really just didn't have that. Goran Dragic had 13 in this game. He was the guy who got them a lot of buckets last season. He didn't really do that. Duncan Robinson only had 5 points in this game. He didn't do that very much this series. Kendrick Nunn, gets credit to him, who had not played very well to start off this series, ended up with 18 points tonight, which was a solid game from him. But ultimately, this Heat team just feels like they need some offense. They can't score. They can play good defense at times, but they can't score. You see in the NBA, really teams need a top 10 type player to make a run in the NBA in the playoffs. That's kind of what you need. It's very rare. Last year's Heat team was one of the rare examples where you don't have like a top 10 guy and you make it to the finals. It's very rare in this NBA. It's superstar driven. That's just the kind of the way it works. And that's why I don't know where the Heat go from here. Because the Heat really right now, their best chance at making another run was trading for James Harden. And that ultimately fell through, whether it was from lack of commitment from the Heat side of the ball, or whether it was the Rockets just wanting to get him to Brooklyn, not liking the Heat package. There was a bunch of different stories out there, so I'm not going to pin this too much on the Heat, but ultimately they did not get James Harden. And that was probably the move they needed to make if they wanted to fully commit and capitalize on their run from last season. They could have gotten Kyle Lowry, but to be honest, I don't think Kyle Lowry changes this series. I don't think Kyle Lowry changes it. I don't think having Victor Oladipo changes this series. I think the Heat were just very outmatched, and they right now are probably they're probably like the fifth, sixth best team in the Eastern Conference. Probably sixth. So I don't know where they go from here. They've got a lot of cap space. They only have 4 guys under contract next season. They've got Jimmy Butler. They've got Bam Adebayo. They've got a team option for a couple of guys that I'm sure they're going to decline on Iguodala and Goran Dragic. Victor Oladipo, Tyler Hero, Precious Achiuwa. Those are like the only guys under contract for this upcoming season. I'm pretty sure Victor Oladipo is a team option too, so they could decline that. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comment section. But overall, they have a ton of cap space. The problem is the big fish they were going after just swept them in Giannis Antetokounmpo, and he signed a supermax last offseason. So that was the big fish. That's the guy they were going for in this free agency. That was kind of their big game plan. It was like, okay, we're not going to get too many contracts. We're going to ultimately make a big swing in 2021 free agency. The problem, like I said, is that Giannis signed a supermax, and the free agents have slowly dropped off the board. The best one available is going to be Kawhi Leonard. Unless they get Kawhi Leonard, this Heat team is in trouble. They need to lure him from Los Angeles. The Heat right now should be the biggest Mavericks fans in the world, because they need the Mavericks to take the Clippers out of the playoffs in the first round. If they can do that, then there's a chance Kawhi could leave. I don't know if he will, because I know he is from LA. Miami's cool and all, but it's nothing like his hometown. He forced his way to LA. He left a championship team in the Raptors that probably could have been like a dynasty level team if he stayed, to go to LA and play with Paul George and play for the Clippers. So I'm not sure how realistic it is he's going to leave, but ultimately Miami is one of the destinations that I could see luring him away from Los Angeles if they lost in this first round. If they win the first round, if they make the conference finals, I don't know if Kawhi leaves. It would be very hard for me to see a path where he leaves if they at least make the conference finals. If they go out in the first 2 rounds, maybe. But if they make the conference finals, then I don't think so. So that's the guy they got to go after. They could go out and get like a DeMar DeRozan, theoretically. They could maybe bring in like a Kyle Lowry. But the problem is I don't think those guys make this team that much better. They make them better, obviously. They would definitely make them a better team. But I don't think they make them a contender. If you add Kyle Lowry or DeMar DeRozan to this team, do they beat the Bucks? I don't think so. Do they beat the Sixers? Do they beat the Nets? I think the answers are all no. I think with those guys, the Heat become a firm 4th best team in the Eastern Conference. And that's the problem. So you've got to think about maybe Tyler Hero gets better. Tyler Hero was great last year's playoffs. He was awful in the playoffs this year. He was not good. He was not the player they needed him to be, and he didn't capitalize off the potential he showed in last year's playoffs. So many lists, ESPN's list famously had him being a top 50 player in the NBA this season. They had Tyler Hero being really, really good this season, and he just wasn't. He didn't step up. He didn't play up to the level that some people thought he was going to. We've seen a lot of that, of people kind of putting way too much pressure on some of these guys who had great bubble performances. You've got to give people time. He's a young player. Tyler Hero still has a ton of potential. The problem is now that he had this poor playoff run, he had this bad series, and overall a bad season compared to the way the outlook looked for him coming out of last year's playoff run, is that his trade value has fallen. His trade value was by far the highest this offseason and at the beginning of this year. Around the time the James Harden trade was going to go down. That's probably when his trade value was highest. And if that was not a trade package that the Rockets were going to go for James Harden, now I don't see them anyway getting another superstar. I don't think they're going to be able to trade unless maybe like a Paul George becomes available. And even then, that's only if Kawhi leaves. And even with Paul George, I don't know how much this team, I don't know if this team gets better. Like, I know they're going to get better, obviously. But I don't see the Clippers like trading Paul George. They don't have the picks. Like, but Paul George is the only realistic guy I could see maybe being available. I don't know. I really don't know where the Heat go from here. I tweeted that out before I started making this video because I wanted to see what people had to say, and everyone was just like, oh, like young guys are going to get better. We can go out in free agency, and you can. But are there any realistic free agents that are going to make this Miami Heat team a contender going forward? Unless you get Kawhi Leonard, I really don't think so. There's just not that many guys in this free agency now that Giannis is gone. So that's my thought on the Miami Heat. They need these young guys to step up for next season. If maybe they bring like a DeMar DeRozan, I'm sure they're going to bring in someone. It's the Miami Heat. They have a ton of cap space. They'll bring someone in, whether or not it's a young guy, like a restricted free agent that they pay a lot of money. But they're going to have to pay Duncan Robinson money. They might have to pay Kendrick Nunn if they want to bring him back. Goran Dragic, they have a team option, so they can decline that and probably bring him back for a bit cheaper. Maybe you bring back Dwayne Dedmon, who had a pretty good run at some point during this series for you in the first couple games. Today, he was not good with no points in 12 minutes, but he was a solid guy. Maybe you could bring him back. Maybe you bring back Trevor Ariza, who knows? There's guys on this team that could come back. The problem is they're aging, and so you need Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero to step up very quickly, as well as whoever you bring in to have a great first season. This is your chance. You have like 1-2 seasons maybe left before Jimmy Butler is going to start declining. I love Jimmy Butler. He's a great player, but he's getting older. He's not like super old or anything like that. I'm actually not quite sure what his age is. I'm going to look that up real quick. My screen's going to lag a little bit. My face cam. Yeah, see? Jimmy Butler is 31 years old. So he's got about 2-3 maybe seasons left before he starts declining a little bit. You don't have a lot of time. And with the way that run went, I think ultimately the Heat are going to become one of the biggest what ifs in the NBA or of recent NBA memory if they do not end up finding any success past that finals run. Because making that finals run, that was special. But it's always going to be a question of, should they have found some way to cash in their assets? Should they have found a way to cash in Tyler Hero? Cash in maybe a Precious Achiuwa, who did not really impress this season. Given, like I said, he's very young. He's a rookie. And if NBA 2K has anything to say about it, if you've ever played 2K, he becomes a beast in NBA 2K simulation. So maybe they know something we don't. But ultimately, it's going to be tough to look back and see if maybe the Heat should have found a way to cash in their draft picks. Or not their draft picks, their assets. Tyler Hero, Precious Achiuwa, Duncan Robinson maybe, who they're now going to have to pay a lot of money. Shooters get paid. Maybe teams will be more cautious now that like a guy like Davis Bertans is really struggling after getting a massive contract, so maybe they'll be a little more cautious. But with how much the league relies on shooting, I would be surprised if Duncan Robinson doesn't get paid a ton of money. So that's another problem the Heat have to worry about. The Heat are just in a really bad situation. Let me know where you think the Heat go from here. If you're Pat Riley, what is your game plan going forward? Like I said, you can bring in DeRozan. You can bring in a Kyle Lowry. You could bring Oladipo back, have him maybe get healthy. But it's looking like Oladipo might not even play next season. So the Heat are in trouble. The Bucks got their revenge. And who knows what's next for Miami. So I appreciate you guys watching the video. Let me know what you would do. Well, let me know what you think is next for the Heat. What do you think about this Heat season? Was it a disappointment? I would personally say it was after the way that they played. A lot of people had the Heat winning this series. I had the Bucks winning in 6, and they swept the Heat in pretty convincing fashion. There was one non-blowout in this entire series, and it was the first game of the series. So shout out to the Milwaukee Bucks for winning this game. We'll see what's next for the Miami Heat. I appreciate you guys watching so much. Thank you so much for watching this. Let me know if this is a series you want to see continued. I would make these anytime a team gets eliminated from the playoffs. So if you want to see that, please let me know in the comment section below, and let me know by leaving a like. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you guys later tonight for After the Buzzer. See you guys later.